It's a theological world after all, after all, after all, after all.
Death, with honesty and hospitality, reveals something profound about what it means to live well, love deeply, and see human dignity beyond fear and denial. What happens to us in our relationships, even our beliefs, when we stop running from death? Welcome to It's a Theological World After All. I'm your host, Joshua Farris. Halloween has recently passed, and with it the strange cultural ritual where we flirt with death. We decorate our porches with skeletons, at least some of us, ghost stories, we laugh nervously at the dark, and if you're like me, you can't help but rewatch a few old horror flicks, especially anything with the great Vincent Price, the philosopher king of horror, reminding us that behind the laughter and the fear was something deeper, a meditation on mortality. We all seem to play with death in our art, but we're terrified of it in life. We hide it away in hospitals, we outsource it to professionals, we even avoid speaking of it until we have no choice. But what if death didn't have to be so taboo? What if facing it could actually bring more dignity, honesty, and maybe even joy to our lives? My guest today is Lauren Ponder, and she's helping us do just that. She's an end-of-life doula. We'll talk about what that means in just a moment. She's the founder of With Love Events and the Last Call End-of-Life Festival. Through death cafes, conversations, creative community gatherings, Lauren is inviting people to talk openly about mortality, not to be morbid or macabre, but to be human and to talk about it in human ways. Together, we're going to explore what it means to die well, how confronting death changes the way we live, and why perhaps learning to let go is one of the most sacred things we can actually do. So grab your coffee, settle in, let's talk about death, dignity, with a bit of humor and with a bit of love. Welcome, Lauren, or Miss Ponder. What should I call you, Lauren?
Lauren, yeah, what a beautiful intro. Thank you so much. You really grasp what I'm attempting to do so beautifully. So I appreciate that understanding.
Excellent.
A lot of
my
times
pleasure.
people are either very interested and open in me being an end-of-life doula, or they say immediately, "Oh, that's really depressing." So you did a beautiful job of capturing what I'm hoping to do in this space.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. Yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting topic. I imagine you get multiple responses of, yeah, that's a little morbid, or maybe that's a little weird. I think we just met back in October at our, I have to mention this, our high school reunion, because we went to high school together. You were one of the popular ones back in high school. And I ran into you, and it was one of those meaningful moments. Most of the conversations that night were, they were fun, but they were forgettable. Not to be mean, but I remember our conversation, and it was very good. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I need to explore that further. She's like a death person. That's kind of weird. Okay. So we talked about it a bit, and so here we are now, and I want to learn a bit more. Obviously, since then, I've done some reading on a variety of these things that you do or things that you're involved in. And at first, it sounds a bit strange, but it's also one of those things, because it's not so common to our culture, or it's not normal yet. You have to do a bit of explanation, I imagine. In order to sell your work, you have to do a bit of explanation up front, a bit of prefacing.
What do we call it? An elevator.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
so
it requires an elevator speech.
That's right. Yeah. So let's jump in, and we'll talk about your elevator speech and expound on that. What let's talk about the work of a death doula. What does it mean to
Mhm.
accompany someone through death rather than fight against it? Let's talk about that
Yeah,
and what it means to
so
be a death doula. What do you actually do? Yeah.
yeah. So the word death doula is defined as a non-medical support person at end of life. And that is a very broad statement that can be taken a lot of ways, depending on the death doula or the end of life planner, or some people say death midwife. So there are various forms that this can take.
Mhm.
Um, and for me personally, that's a lot of conversation having about what it means to have a good death, or what someone may hope for in a good death, or arrangements after they die. And to other doulas, that could mean something very different. But it all starts from this place of wanting people to understand their options for end of life and supporting them in making those options available to them, much like a birth doula would help a
Mm.
mother who maybe doesn't know exactly what options they have in the birthing room, wherever that may be. A birth doula does that end of it, and then a death doula would do the same at the end of life. Is here are the options you do have. You don't have to do what everybody else has done, or what you've seen or experienced in death in your life. And so options and supporting that person and being an advocate for them if they want certain things to take place around their death and dying experience.
Mhm. Good, good. Yeah. So, yeah, that's good. I've heard of a birth doula, and I think in our so maybe there's a parallel here that can be drawn. There's certainly a parallel, obviously, in a liturgical tradition, you have liturgical ritual practices of
Mm.
from birth to death, beginning of life to end of life. So it makes sense that if you're going to have a birth doula, you'd have a death doula or something like that. I mean, a birth doula, it makes sense in this cultural climate for me, coming from uh, a more holistic approach to kind of
Mhm.
medicine and living life. A lot of my, what would you call them? My crunchy friends, I guess you'd call them. That's a negative, but it's not a negative term. But they're very
No.
granola friend. Yeah, they're very holistic. So many of them hire birth doulas so that they can have home births. Because
Mhm.
I think for a long time that wasn't even conceived of as an option, at least in the mid 1900s and the like. I don't think that was very
Right.
kind of normal. I mean, the normalization of going to a big hospital and other practices
Mhm.
when you give birth was just that's just what you do. So you didn't have any other options, right? So birth doulas have been, I think, very helpful. Many people in my family have hired a birth doula, and they loved it and thought it was very useful for that process.
Mhm.
So I imagine something like a death doula is the same thing, right? Um,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
You
So
can die at home if
yeah,
you want to die at home, like, and
mm,
even culturally, we've kind of taken that and passed it on, much like we did with births, to a bigger institution, to,
yeah,
somebody that knows better, right?
yeah.
And we lost a lot of that education of that. We know how to do these things, right? Whether we trust ourselves or feel confident in ourselves to do these things, and that doesn't mean you don't have any help when problems arise, but somebody could have a home, peaceful death, home funeral. Everything could happen at home. And people don't realize that anymore. They
Mm,
just assume they have to do XYZ that has happened in every funeral arrangement or every death that they've experienced is they
mm,
go to the hospital and they die there, like, well,
yeah,
we don't have to go to the
yeah.
hospital. But you got to have those conversations ahead of time,
That's
so that's
right.
where I step in and have found my space to be is educating people on those choices way before they actually need to make those choices. Because when an event a traumatic event happens, you don't have time to research or the energy or the mental bandwidth to take in any of that information.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think maybe it's a good time for death doulas maybe to become, maybe it'll start to become kind of more normative for people to think, oh yeah, I can get a death doula. I mean, especially in this time with kind of skepticism around big hospital practices, medical profession. If you're already somewhat, at least critically accepting of mainstream medicine, you might want to look into other alternatives that would allow you to be at home and things like that. Yeah, I think that's that makes. I think it's starting to make some sense. Yeah. So let's talk about how you found yourself in this work, because I'm sure there's a story there that you can tell. You didn't just this probably wasn't one of those obvious options when you went to your college counselor years ago.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. And though I think it's so generous of you to say, like, Lauren was one of the popular kids in high school. Yeah, yes. And I had fun talking and meeting people. So maybe that made me a familiar face to a lot of people. But from being a young child, I've been very interested in death rituals. So
Mm.
or how we approach when a death event occurs. And so I've kind of always been the weird kid in that way. I have always been the like, I might not like look like a person who thinks about death often, but I definitely from a young age remember being interested in this. And then actually in my 20s, I had a career shift and I thought about becoming a funeral director in
Hmm.
my 20s
Hmm.
and was actually kind of encouraged not to take that path again because people thought of it as morbid or like too depressing or, like
Really?
would just be a really hard job, like you're too happy for that to be a funeral director. And so I went into HR and then as my mom aged, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and she
Mm-hmm.
died at 66.
Oh.
And at her death, you have a week-ish to plan a funeral. We had not talked about anything about it. Like
Wow.
we did not have a good idea of what we were doing. And in that instance, like, thank goodness that my dad and my mom are Catholic. So we
Mm-hmm.
had a roadmap. We had a, like, these are the
Mm-hmm.
things we do. And so we had a good guide to tell us what was appropriate, especially for my dad and his mourning. And so it just got me overly interested again in like, why do we do it this way? Right? Like,
Yeah.
why do we not talk about this at all until it happens? And then we make all of these decisions in a very short amount of time and
Mm-hmm.
like hope that we're doing the right
Mhm.
thing, like maybe think we are, but aren't really sure. We're trying to do it together as a family. And so I took a real big deep dive into why in America we have these ways of doing funerals and burials and why it's kind of the standard right now. And that is where I found what death positive means, which is basically what you've described in in the themes
Uh-huh.
that you put so beautifully, which is being death positive means I'm going to think about my death. I know I'm going to die at some point. So I'm going to think about how, if I die tomorrow, what am I going to do today to make me feel good about my existence today? Much
Mm.
like the memento mori practice, which I also
Mm.
didn't realize was from a Catholic background, even though I was raised Catholic. And I was like, I
Huh.
love it. This is a great technique to think about, to reflect on what may be so that we can live and enjoy life more fully now. So I became
Good.
death positive and I started doing
Death
death
positive.
cafes and then I started doing And then I learned what an end-of-life doula was, and I was like, yeah, okay, I could see that being something that I gravitate towards. So it has been a journey for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Uh, so you're located in St. Louis area, broadly, St. Louis, Missouri, right? So you do a lot of work there, right? Yeah, and
Mhm.
I think it's important for the listeners to know
Yes.
you probably don't travel around too much, or do you?
Yeah, I have not, besides, like, helping friends and family via phone or, video chats, but, no, I haven't really found the need to do much traveling yet to assist people, but there are death doulas kind of everywhere. So,
Are there?
anytime that I chat with somebody, wherever they may be, I always encourage them to do some more research. And maybe I'm not the right fit for them, and there might be somebody else better suited for what they're looking for. So, there's people out there doing this work.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't think it's overly saturated of a market yet, but there are resources, especially with the technology world we live in. There's a lot of people who can do a lot of help just
Yeah, that's
virtually too.
true. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, yeah. Is it? Yeah, maybe I need to do a little search around here. I'm wondering if it is my. There's so much online. There's so many different things going on, different types of jobs and consultant work and things that I may really not be aware of how many death doulas there are. So you're my
Mhm.
impression was different, that it's still like fairly new, but maybe it's a bit more not saturated, but maybe there's a bit more there than I'm realizing or thinking there are. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's a momentum. I definitely think there's a momentum happening in this end of life space where when I started talking about this, like, let's see, probably 6 years ago before I really decided, like, yeah, I'm gonna do this stuff. Um, there wasn't a ton, and most people did not wanna talk to me about it. If I if I was like, "Hey, this is what I think I'm gonna do," they were not on board to even have a conversation with me about what I was planning on doing. So, I
Uh,
do think in the shift with potentially with COVID, with, like, the
mm.
pandemic, and people just experiencing death in a different way, I do think there has been a shift where more people seem at least open to hearing what I do without the immediate knee-jerk reaction of, like, changing the subject. With, like,
Good,
completely being like, "Oh, that's great. Let's talk about our kids instead." So,
good.
so I do think that there is a shift. And even,
Mhm.
during COVID, of close friends, I remember asking me of like, "Oh, are you so busy now because everybody is thinking about death and dying now?"
Yeah.
And at the time, I really didn't wanna do a whole lot of virtual stuff, so I was like, "No," because I hope to have these conversations with people in person. I hope to,
Mhm.
hold, um, events for people in person, and so COVID wasn't my time to, like, go big, but it was my time for reflection, like a lot of people, of where this can take me, and
Hmm.
maybe some quieter time in our lives to be able to grow outwards from there.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let's tease this out a little bit in terms of specific things, just to give people some a bit more of a concrete grasp on what a death doula might help
Mhm.
with. I'm thinking right now, and I've mentioned this to you before. My father going through some troubled season. He's had a
Mhm.
stroke, so he has, and hasn't come out of it. He has cognitive and physical impairments now because of it.
Mhm.
And so, at one level, it started making sense to me now. Oh, a death doula could actually be helpful, could have been helpful. I can't find all sorts of things that I need right now. And my father's not in a cognitive state to actually communicate it. So, Well, that's a little bit of a challenge. So tell us some other things, just concrete things that you would help people with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The place where I started in a concrete service was celebration of life. So,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
planning an event um, before a death or after a death. So either involving the person who wants to plan their event for after their death or helping the family after a death event occurs. So that's the concrete place where I started was meaningful rituals around end of life, which we typically call celebrations of life, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm,
really what it
mhm.
is a ritual saying this person's life has ended and we appreciate that life and we're going to honor them in this way. I find most of the people who find me for those services don't have a spiritual community that they're a part
Mhm,
of, and so
mhm.
they might still be spiritual, all right, but they don't have a church they're going to or a particular group that they're a part of. And so I help them kind of craft an event around that. That's where it started.
Okay.
Since then, some of the ways that I help people is by doing a service called a Swedish Death Cleaning, which
Yeah.
is reducing and minimizing the things in their home by meaningfully giving items to people that they want to pass them on to. It could be friends, family, it could be an organization they want to donate to. So helping people do that work of minimizing the physical things around them by telling the story of why those things are important and then gifting them to other people or other organizations so that those products can go on and make somebody else happy too. So,
Yeah.
those are two
Yeah.
really solid, um, easy to describe death doula offerings. But then also sometimes I get hired by a person who does have a terminal diagnosis and they just want somebody to talk to because they're having a hard time talking to their loved ones about their
Mhm.
decision to maybe stop a treatment
Uh-huh.
or what they want for a celebration event. Because just a lot of us are not comfortable talking about this. And so
Yeah.
it takes practice to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, that's a little bit looser of a consulting gig, right? Is to be
Sure.
like, I want you to be around and I want to talk through these items. It's like,
Yeah.
great, let's do that. And I have an expertise in those items that they may not have or their people around them may not have, but they want everybody to be on the same page. So it can also be that sort of setting, but again, in non-medical. So if they ask me about um, should I stop taking this medication? It makes me feel crappy. Like,
Yeah.
that's not my role. That's,
Right.
like
You wanna make
you
that
still,
clear, right? You wanna make that
yes,
clear. Yeah,
yes,
I get it.
that's not my role.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can encourage you to talk to your doctor about that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like you feel comfortable telling me that you want to stop this medication for these reasons. How do you feel comfortable telling your doctor that? And if not, how do we get you comfortable in telling your doctor that you want to stop these things because of your personal reasons for them? So that's the advocate piece that also a birth doula would do, right? So a
Okay.
birth
Yeah.
doula would maybe say to a hospital or a doctor like, "No, that's not really what we talked about before. Can we talk about that a little bit more?" They still may end up going in the one route or another, but it's slowing down enough to have that conversation. So death doula on the other side, I'm not going to recommend medications or changing plans, but I can say, can we pause a little bit more because in previous talks we talked about this. Do you still feel that way? Does that matter to you, medical staff? In that this is what has been communicated previously. So it's
Yeah.
having that third party to help support in those as things progress at end of life.
Excellent. No, good. Good. That's
Yeah.
very helpful. Very helpful. Yeah. Okay. So, a fun question. You have kids, right? Is there a pause? I think we're getting a pause here. Sorry about that. Did you hear me? Yes.
No problem.
Um,
Yes.
there must be a lag. Sorry about that. So you have kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So has being a death doula changed how you talk to your kids about life and death?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually think kids have a really great insight onto like great questions about end of life. And I encourage everyone to talk really openly and honestly with their kids about death and end of life and try to stay away from things like if a loved one dies, like they're in the clouds now. That can be very confusing, right? So like what does being in the clouds mean? We still have to let them know that there's a finite end to this existence here, and depending on your beliefs, there may be a whole nother wonderful thing beyond this that's really awesome, that like that sounds really cool too. So what do your kids think that other potential existence is? Like that's really interesting to hear what they think maybe afterwards, um just based on what they see in the world around them and their conversations with other people. And so yes, I talk to my kids very openly about death and dying. My daughter was at my mom's funeral as a 2-year-old running around like causing causing a scene, being a child at
Uh-huh.
a funeral home, which I was fine with. I hope it didn't make other people uncomfortable, but I thought was perfectly acceptable for her to just be a 2-year-old in that moment, and that was our life. So yeah, they are very used to it. They know that I help people with the dying process,
Mhm.
and yeah, they don't seem. I was gonna say they don't seem freaked out by it, but I do think everybody, even death doulas,
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
a innate fear of the unknown, right? So most people's fear of death is I don't really know what happens. I don't know what the act of dying is going to be like. So it's that
Right.
unknown, I
Yeah.
think, that is really scary to us. And
Yeah.
we've let it become such a monster of scariness that we just don't talk about it and think that's going to like hide it.
Right.
And that's not true. It's going to
Yeah.
happen,
It's
you
gonna
know?
happen. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So so
Yeah.
in my opinion, talking about it,
Yeah.
saying maybe those scary things out loud takes some of those scary feelings away. To
Yeah.
just to say like I'm freaked out about it because of XYZ, takes some of that power away from it.
Yeah. Right. No, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if, yeah, this topic of, yeah, I think about how, I talk to my daughter just about everything. I mean, to varying degrees. And as she's getting older, of course, we'll have, uh, more particular conversations about the same topics as she can, process it cognitively and
Mhm.
emotionally, morally. Um, I know when I was growing up, I don't think we talked about death hardly at all. And I don't remember hearing much about it or getting much even religious instruction on it. But maybe that's beginning to change. Hopefully, maybe there's some resources out there that can help people kind of think through. Uh, pe- to many, it may be very much of a disconnect for them. Like, how do I like broach this topic with my kids in a helpful way. Um, so maybe
Mhm.
there's some resources out there, but yeah, I want to switch gears. We'll talk about death cafes in just a second. I want to ask one more subjective question about your work as a death doula. Do you see moments of beauty maybe even transcendence in your work, where at times it makes death feel less like an ending and more like a revelation? That's a
Mm,
loaded question.
I
Yes.
love it though. I love it. Yeah, I had a really beautiful experience with a client who has a beautiful love story, and she, both her and her partner, would say they're atheists. Are like there's
Mhm.
nothing. It's over. It just all stops after this.
Uh-huh.
That was their belief.
That's her view.
But
Uh-huh.
in our meetings ahead of time, she slid a comment in there of like, but I get to find out. Like I
Yeah.
get to find out if
Ah,
I'm right or not. And I was like, yeah,
interesting.
that's pretty cool that,
Yeah.
like nobody wants you to go, but you do get to find out before we do.
Right.
And so when the time got closer and I'm spending time with her and her partner, and it's so clear their love is so beautiful. And, she looks over at me and she asked, am I dying? And I said, I can't tell you the time, but it does appear that you're beginning the process and you get to find out. Remember, you get to find out. So it's
Wow.
coming whether you want to or not, and you get to find out the big secret that all of us
Wow.
want to find out about. And she did die later the next morning.
Wow.
And I find some joy in knowing that she got to find out. so
Yeah.
so I do think it can be a beautiful experience. I do want to clarify when I say that it can be beautiful, that I understand that there is a lot of really tragic death that
Sure.
nobody finds any beauty in, and it's hard. And death is hard, even when it's a good death for somebody, meaning peaceful and calm and not a tragic,
Yeah.
dramatic event. So death is
Yeah.
not easy,
Right.
but the hope is by sitting with it and by being there when we can be there, it's less scary, and we do make it more of a spiritual or transcendent, what a great word, experience for
Mhm.
us that we get to experience as the person still living.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. There is a tension in this. Yeah. And I don't know how long we want to dwell here or anything, but I think you brought it up in your answer there. There is a tension. For many years, I've gone to funerals. For many years, I didn't know much about funerals or death or rituals, um, and I was very ignorant about lots of things. But I would go, and they would have celebrations of life, and I had mixed feelings about celebrations of life for a long time. I was like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, we need to celebrate life. Yeah. And maybe that's kind of the death positive perspective. I hadn't heard that term before. So I'm glad to learn that. So that's a common terminology that's being utilized right now. You didn't just make that
Right
up.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did not make that up. Yes, that
Yeah.
is a term you can look up and find a bunch of info on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, so I had this tension. I was like, yeah, we need to, there's certain practices in ancient tradition where ancient Christian tradition, a lot of Anglicans, when they preside over a funeral, they will preach a kind of general message, but they will say nothing about the person. And I thought, oh, that's strange. That's so strange. If that's the
Mm,
way, I mean, I think surely there's got to be a way to bring the personal element into the ritual and whatever the message is that's fit within that kind of ritualistic
right.
exercise. But the
Right.
celebration of life was also like, for me, it was like, this death is so dark too. It is a
Mhm.
little scary. I mean, there's a side of it that's scary, and then there's a side of it that's more extreme. Of course, when you look at, as you know, I love the old horror films, the classic horror films like Vincent Price, where he's caught up in kind of the philosophical reflections on Edgar Allan Poe and the kind of macabre kind of encounter or experience of death, which I mean, there is that side of it. I think it certainly is extreme, and it can be extreme. So there's the in the Reformed tradition, for example, there's a big emphasis on like death is like it's bad, like it's a punishment. And then
Right.
in the Catholic side, you have, I think, arguably, I think you have more of a balance in the Catholic side. The Catholics, they see it as like, yeah, this is a consequence. Like there's a dark side to it, but there's also especially for the good life, right? There's something to be said for a good death that the old philosophers talked about. There's an art of
Right.
dying well. And so you're trying to reclaim the art of dying well in some ways in your work. That's what I'm
Yes.
gathering. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And you can't guarantee that, right?
Mm.
So like if somebody comes to me and says like, I never want to die in a hospital, don't let me die in a hospital.
Mm.
I cannot guarantee that.
Right.
Like-
Right. You can't.
like-
It's out of your control, depending on how
Right.
what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the example I gave was if you're in a motorcycle accident, you're going to the hospital. You
Right.
know, like
Right.
I'm not stopping them from taking you to the hospital.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I can't guarantee any sort, but what would that good death be? I still want to hear what that is. Is it music or certain scents, or do you want people to hold your hand, or do you want to be left alone? And that could change every day, just like we all change every day. We could want it to be warm and fluffy and like give me all the blankets and a fire, and then be like, no, this is all horrible, like everybody leave. I just want to be left alone, So I hope to come back to this good death idea, but getting there means talking about it. And we aren't even talking about it most of
Right.
the time, because a good death could be different for everybody. And if we don't talk about it, we don't even know what that means.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It has to begin in a conversation. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's right. That's right. Good. So let me press on. I was going to ask you something else, and it'll come to me in a moment.
Yeah.
It'll come to me in a moment. It was
Well,
okay.
let me ask
Yeah.
you. I listened to a couple of your episodes of this podcast.
Great.
And I loved the one on grieving and mourning. And I thought it just had so many good tidbits that I didn't even realize as well about how spirituality plays into the grieving process as well. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that our death and grieving processes are have room for growth, or do you think that it is what it is, and we have a roadmap that we can follow for how to grieve after a death?
Yeah. 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 That's a good question. Yeah. Rich question. Yeah. So, that was a good discussion there on grief. He's the gentleman there. He's forced me to think and rethink some issues on grief. I think obviously there's old ancient practices that we've alluded to already, that you've alluded to in the Roman Catholic tradition.
Mhm.
The Roman Catholic tradition, I think, has really thought about these things a lot more clearly than some of the other sub-traditions within Christianity more broadly. They've done a good
Mhm.
job of supplying well-grounded ritual practices that are useful in there's not a one size fits all. There's not like a one kind of cookie cutter
Mhm.
approach to death itself. I mean, these are practices that are to be lived in the concrete experiences of people. and
Right.
their communities and specifically their families and the like. So these are principled, grounded practices that are to be used. But I think grieving is something that is one of the thoughts I think that we picked up on there is that grieving is almost a kind of virtuous process that does condition toward virtue. It can make you better as you prepare for the next life, assuming there is a next life, of course. And
Right.
I think I think there is. I believe there is, and so I think it's an important part of the process of
Yeah.
preparing for the next life, of dying well. So I think in our kind of culture and climate, and I wanted to talk to you about this in some form or fashion, but our Western cultural climate that's kind of embedded in a kind of marketing sort of consumerist mentality. Death is like the opposite of consumption. I mean, in one sense, I mean, our bodies make that an impossibility. So it's when you confront that reality, there is something of an unsurety, even a horror to that, I think, especially if you've been bred in that kind of environment. So it makes sense why people would want to evade the conversation and not talk about it. It's going to happen, but let's just avoid it till it happens. But I think that would be an unhelpful, unvirtuous way to approach it. So
I would actually argue with you.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd argue with you that we're still consumers. The funeral industry is huge. So even after death, there's lots of ways to spend money. Yeah, there's lots of ways to spend money, to be a consumer in that way, right? So maybe that's where my head went with consumerism, is, and that's part of the reason why I think people should talk about it sooner, because we also relate spending money to like how much we cared for somebody or how much we love somebody. Like, how much money did you spend on their funeral? Like, did you get them the grandest? Does that mean you didn't love them as much because you didn't get them the grandest of all the things? And well, I think you guys even touched on in the other episode as well about like the virtual living on, and there's all sorts of technology coming out that, you know, can kind of make us live forever in a virtual world. So it's like, I would argue that it is very much a capitalist environment still, and there is a lot of room for doing a lot of things even after a death event occurs, you know. So you guys kind of touched on that in the episode before, and there's a lot of things coming out now that we are such a technology-driven, AI-driven world.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that does raise a lot of questions about how we're thinking about death and the role that kind of consumption plays in it. Certainly, if death can be avoided altogether, I mean, you might say that the consumerist would buy into the kind of transhumanist manifesto and say, well, let's avoid this. We don't need a death doula. Let's live on. And if that's possible, if I could be uploaded to the cloud and then occupy some sort of artificial body that I could experience through or something like that. Yeah, that would certainly kind of transform the whole conception of death that I think like we are talking about, that we see as good and important, right? What do you think? What are your thoughts, Lauren?
I don't know, because I personally am all about people having choice over their own lives. So if somebody really wants to live forever, AI, however that looks, good for them. Like, I'm not going to tell them they're wrong for that. But I personally struggle with seeing the benefit to that.
Mm,
Like,
mhm.
I kind of hope that there is something after this that's better than this.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and hell, maybe I even get another shot at something else. And like,
Ah,
that
yeah.
doesn't seem that bad to me. And I don't
Right.
claim to know that I know any of those answers. So I have a hard time when people do believe in an afterlife but want to live forever. And I'm like, why? I hear this thing is pretty cool. Like, why wouldn't we want to go there
Yeah.
eventually when our time comes? And why wouldn't we want to make our transition into that as beautiful as possible if we are able to? So that's kind of
Right.
where I stand. Like, to each
Yeah.
their own. You want to live forever? Awesome.
Yeah.
Go for
Yeah.
it. I think I'll be okay whenever the time comes. I think whatever is will be.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I think that's interesting. Yeah, the whole perspective on living on in this life and extending our mortality, our mortal life is yeah, certainly those questions are being raised as live possibilities. I don't think that's another discussion. We're probably not having that conversation right now, but I think
Right.
it's I don't think it's a possibility, but if it is a possibility, what are the ramifications there for how we conceive of death right now as a kind of end? There is a kind of end
Right.
to it, and I think you're right. Like, if there is an afterlife, and we're realists, then we want to go there. We wouldn't want to extend this life. There seems something, well, uh, you know, there's several thoughts that I have about that. I mean, when I think of the Edgar Allan Poe story, what's the story? What's the name? I'm blanking on the name. Yeah, I just watched it around Halloween. Vincent Price was in it. Anyway, the husband and his best friend, who's Vincent Price, they put the lady's body in the cave, and
Mm.
she's in a casket in the cave. And while she's in there, there's this water there that apparently has these magical healing qualities to the water. And apparently it preserves her whole body to where she looks like she hasn't aged at all, right? Or her body hasn't even decomposed. And later on in the story, she comes back to life. And there's this fixation on that kind of preservation of life, or even bringing life back to life, that
Mhm.
I think Poe is picking up on as kind of, there's something alluring about it, but there's also
Mhm.
something kind of w- macabre about it. There's something off. It's like,
Mhm.
and there's been several horror stories that have put this sort of picture forward. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's totally fine. But when I think of like this idea of like preserving life artificially forever, it it seems just intuitively seems off to me. It seems off.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think part of that also is like in Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, he has this recurring phrase throughout the Bible where well, there's multiple phrases. Um, one is there is a sun setting and there is a time to keep.
Mm.
And time to keep is it's an important theme insofar as like there's a time now to keep, and there's going to be some kind of conclusion to this time, to this season of my life. There's going to be a conclusion,
Mhm.
and whatever's after is distinct from this kind of time that I have now to do whatever I'm
Mhm.
supposed to be doing. Hopefully, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Hopefully, I'm doing something somewhat meaningful. but
Right.
but there's a time to keep. So that's one thought that came to mind. People don't agree with that, of course, and that's one thought that I keep going back to. Is there a time to keep, and is death like the Roman Catholics would say? Is it to be meaningfully kept in a way that we're to prepare for it? Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so many of our funeral, body disposition. I shouldn't say funeral. So much of our body disposition, um, normals right now are to keep that body intact as long as we can. And some of that is logistics, right? Some of that makes sense for logistics, but it is interesting to me culturally that we do seem still a little fixated on protecting this vessel that we were in, even though I think most people believe that it's potentially just a vessel, right? That it's not like that person's whole essence is in that body's that vessel. And so, when you don't legally have to be embalmed, but most people are, and most people think they have to be embalmed. At least when I chat with people, they're like, "Well, you have to be embalmed?" And it's like, no, you don't have to, but most people do that just because that's what is done these days and don't question it. So it's like we don't even take the time to think enough about, like, is it important to us to keep that body in that form? Is that, like, the cave, is that important to us, and why is that important to us? And maybe if we can let go of that in some way, then we have other choices and other options that might feel more suited to an individual, instead of making these decisions in the heat of a moment when we have to, and things get done and money gets spent, and later you're just in a fog of like, well, we just did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, those are the kinds of conditioned habits that need to be thought through meaningfully. Is that the right way? Is that the healthy way? Is that, I don't know, virtuous, if we have any category of virtue? Is that the good death? I mean, there might be a tendency, just because this is the way it's done and this is the way we're conditioned, to put kind of a cosmetic face on the dead person that's consistent with the kind of tendency to cosmetically preserve our youthfulness, which is a common, somewhat common today. I mean, a lot of couples do it. A lot of wives do it in certain wealthier families.
Yep.
Is that what we mean by the good life and the good death? Yeah.
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 Well, we aren't even asking. I mean, I would say no, but I also don't fault anybody for doing it. I just worked a funeral where I was the celebrant, again, non-religious, needed somebody to lead. Nobody in the family wanted to lead, and I was hired to lead a service, and I was like jaw drop at the beauty of the casket, the flowers, like all of the things that were put into preserving the body in a beautiful setting. And that's great for them, like I don't personally need that to feel like I have a good death for myself in the future. But man, they did a beautiful job with the ceremony, and if they feel good about it, awesome. Like, that's their good death. But when we don't even think about it ahead of time, we end up making decisions that like may mean that or may not.
Yes, right. You just reminded me of a book. It was one of the best books I've read in the last 5 years, by I think it was New York Times bestseller, a book of reflections on the body by a gentleman who was a funeral director. So you would be very
Ooh,
interested in this book,
yeah.
because you obviously you wanted to go into that field at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can't think of the name. I'm gonna have to send that to you.
Okay. Yeah, please
Uh,
do.
it
Please do.
was, it really was top 5 in the last 5 years, top 5 books.
All
Um,
right.
okay, so good. Okay, so we'll uh, we could spend this whole time talking about uh death doula and the meaning of death. Certainly, I do want to cover some other topics. Um, I'm wondering if we should have had multiple chats about this, but
Well, I was going to tell you, I want to do a second round with your morning friend.
oh,
Gosh, I'm blanking on his name now, but I
Macaulay,
yes,
Rhoda. I can't pronounce his
I know. You did it in the
Macaulay.
podcast.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah,
would be
we should
great.
do a round 2 with him.
Mm,
It would be interesting to
that would
hear
be
his grief
great.
perspectives um, and because I also find that people even try to kind of separate those 2 conversations, and not that that's bad, just because of our discomfort with death, we try to just talk about grief without actually talking about the death. And when we go to death cafes, I hear that so often that people come to the death cafe because they want to talk about what happened and nobody is comfortable talking to them about the death, right? Or just hearing them speak about this person that has died. And so, um, they
Yeah.
absolutely are both fruitful enough of conversations to have on their own. But I do think we do a lot with grief. We want to understand how to control our grief, but maybe not necessarily by talking about the death event. And that could be the death event of losing a job, of losing a relationship, not even like the
Mm,
death event of a person dying, but like we
mm,
talk about grief a lot and we don't necessarily capture how often we have death experiences in our everyday life. The death of a computer
yeah.
that holds all of your information on it, and how you mourn oh my gosh, all this work I did is gone, you know? So, like, we experience these things all the time, and we are just so bad at talking about it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I lost my not due to anything like that I did, but I lost my job and my whole vocational life shortly before 2020 and then after 2020 things are just different now. Um and that felt like a death. That was a
Mhm.
real kind of experience that I'm not sure if I processed and people didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it much,
Right.
right? Cuz it's not
Nope.
polite. It's not
Not
polite.
polite. Awkward.
It's
Awkward
awkward. Yes, of course.
conversation.
It
Yeah,
is, but it is kind of a death. Yeah. Mm.
absolutely.
So tell me about death cafes then. Okay, you've already touched on it. Tell me, like, what do you do there? And I'm really
Yes.
interested. I've just started learning about this, and I'm considering starting up one here. There's not one here in this county. I'm almost certain, unless it's just not
Yeah.
publicized. There's not one here. There is one in the broader Birmingham area where I live, but not here specifically where I'm living.
I hope you do start one. So, a death cafe is a meet-up group. It's a conversation group where you have no agenda and no sales or marketing. And so
Mm.
it is usually in a place where you can have like a coffee or I think traditionally you were supposed to bring cake to it or cookies to it. So that's why it's a cafe. But I've been to plenty where I've had a beer and a piece of pizza. So,
Oh, good.
you
Okay.
can kind of make it your own how it is. I think they are really a 1 hour group usually. It's and come and go as you please, where you all introduce yourself and say what might be on your mind about death and dying, and that could be anything. And you let the conversation lead from there. So, like I said, a lot of people come that I've experienced because they would like to talk about a death experience they had and are having a hard time finding, even in their community, that person or those people that are willing to talk to them about what happened, because we're awkward and we don't know what to say. And, so it's a very open group for that, though it is not a grief group. So if you're grieving, then there's great resources for grief groups. This is not that people don't express grief in the group, but that's not the purpose of it. A lot of times people come with a article they read or a movie they saw or, something that they've learned recently. And again, just want to talk about it. What I would say those are the main things. And so we end up talking about like aquamation versus fire cremation, right? So like the different types of cremation, and people like have questions about that. And enough of us come to these on a regular basis that we might have a little more information for them to be able to talk about it. But nobody running the group has to be an expert in anything. Nobody's claiming to be an expert. It's just a group that's there to talk about what's on their mind, because sometimes, or maybe most of the time, it's hard to find somebody to talk to about these random death and dying topics that's willing to talk about it without being like, that's weird or that's morbid or that's depressing or all those things that I sometimes get as somebody who's interested in these topics. So it could be the death of a business or the death of a relationship, so even people can come just being curious about how those things align together.
No, that's helpful. That's good. I think in our it makes sense that we would have this in our kind of modern society. As this kind of topic has become passé, impolite conversation. In the South, I mean, there's certain things in the South you don't say. I grew up in Midwest, military family and family that was a bit more maybe what you would call low culture, kind of lower middle class. So the way they communicate was a bit more direct sometimes. And so you don't do that in the South so much. That would be considered. So something like this, where these kinds of things and these questions get kind of eschewed or pushed aside or ignored. A lot of people are very probably feeling a lot of uncertainties, a lot of ambiguities, and maybe hurt from some of those intellectual ambiguities that they, being in an environment like this, where this is what we're doing. Well, that cuts off a lot of the awkwardness when you just say, this is what we're doing. If you want to come here, you can. That's great. We're going to talk about these things.
Right.
That's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in tradition, in ancient, we do have this practice. I mean, it's a similar practice, it sounds like, in Death Cafe. At least there's some kind of parallel there of confession, where confession isn't just about going to your priest to confess your sins. Although, if you're Catholic, I recommend you do that. But
right. I was I thought that was the only reason. You'll have to educate me, because that's what I understood.
Well, yeah, I think in a liturgical context, every Sunday we would come and we confess something. We confess honestly about who we are before God, what our standing is before God, what our relationship is to God based upon what He says. We confess, say, the Nicene Creed, which you confess every Sunday in Mass at Roman Catholic Mass. You make a confession, and this is very explicitly a communal activity. It's an important communal activity where you are coming and being honest about your life and your mortality.
Right.
and you're naming something so that you can give that thing less power. I mean, so when we confess the Nicene Creed, we're saying something about the nature of our mortality and death. Death doesn't have the final word, right? So we're making confession about that, and that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I did want to. I just found the book. I remembered what it was.
Oh,
You must read this. It's wonderful. It's by Thomas Lynch. Thomas Lynch. He was a National Book Award finalist of the book called The Undertaking. But the book I read was called Bodies in Motion and at Rest.
okay.
Bodies in Motion and at Rest.
All right.
On metaphor and mortality. It was fantastic. Fantastic read.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your thoughts when you read it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I want to pick up the essays. I keep going back to the last podcast I listened to of yours with the
good.
essays on grieving. No, what was the title of that one too? I'll go back and find it in the previous episode.
That'd be great. So we'll bring this around to a conclusion. Maybe I can just ask you a couple more quick questions, and then we'll bring it to a close. Okay, you've already mentioned this to some degree about Swedish death. This was a new thing for me, and I've just started watching a series. Yeah, on
You did?
yeah.
Oh, good.
Peacock,
right? Yeah,
Peacock. There's a documentary on it. It's very interesting. So I'm still working through it slowly. But
Yeah.
Swedish Death Cleaning.
Yes.
So I want to ask you about that. Tell me a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about that, and also tell us
Yeah.
about how is it like emotionally, maybe even spiritually helpful to go through that process as a kind of grace, of letting go.
Yeah, absolutely. So this also is not something that I came up with. So I don't want to take credit for the things I'm describing today. But I do love them and promote them. So Swedish Death Cleaning, this is a thing in Sweden. So the word is Döstädning, right? So it is a real thing in Sweden. It's not just a pretty name. And there is a great quick read, The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. And then they did the TV series from there. The Peacock series is really great too. But it is a ritual that is common in Sweden to go through your items, your personal property items, and find them a new home when you are done loving them. And so that could be when you're aging. That could also just be like when you're cleaning out your childhood room and you're ready to move on to the next chapter. So I think the title of death cleaning gives it a little edge that gets people's attention for sure. But that is the real word in Sweden and is death cleaning. And so it is the art of finding these items that have meant something to you, acknowledging that they've meant something to you, maybe telling the story or the legacy of why that was important for you in that time in your life, and then passing that on to someone else. So whether that is a loved one, a friend, a family member, or like I said, an organization that may need items of a certain degree, it's a great way to kind of minimalize the things in your life, especially as you age, and you may not need as many things as you think you once needed in your physical life. And I think it's really a legacy project, at least in the work that I've ended up doing with clients on Swedish death cleaning. It really does feel so much more like hearing their stories and hearing their legacy that they hope to pass on to someone else, and just having those stories be remembered for longer than they will be here. And so I find it really a great way to get a lot of ducks in a row even. So like you're saying how it's hard to find stuff for your dad right now.
Right. Yeah.
I usually end up finding some of those important things doing this process with clients, right? Of like,
Yeah.
oh, here's the healthcare directive in this stack of papers by the desk that
Yeah.
who's going to know to look for this directive in this area. Well, let's get all those items together in the proper place. So it usually ends up being a feel-good moment, but also a really feeling good about getting progress done as far as preparing items. Like these are all my important papers for when somebody does need to make a decision for me or after
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
it can be a dual role.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I could see how that would be not only freeing. It's you're bringing some order to your life. For those who want to have some kind of control, at least over their future, this is a
Mhm.
way to bring some control and order in their life beforehand.
Yeah.
Before the yeah, and it can be it could be a cathartic experience, therapeutic, even.
Mhm.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. Yeah.
Well, I actually just did a little bit of this for myself. My mom had all these fire safes of important documents, right? And
Hmm.
I brought a couple over to my house. And in one of the folders, I found an entire story about her that I did not know. Just the things she kept, it was like getting accepted to dental school and then her resignation letter when she decided to go with her dad to the Philippines, which is where she met my dad, and then coming back and trying to find a job. It was just kind of amazing seeing this like historical part of her laid out that I had never seen before. And I wish we would have been able to go through that when she was present, but I'm very grateful that now I get to, kind of read her history in this other way. And I'm really excited
Oh,
to
that's
share it with my
cool.
siblings. They've never seen it either. So I'm asking them to do a dinner with me where we can kind of go through and read some of these stories together, just as our ritual of
Mm.
remembering her and keeping her story in our lives. So,
Oh, that's excellent.
it can be
Yeah.
so much fun and it can be really hard and it can be all the range of emotions, but in the end, I do promote it as something really beneficial to people,
Yeah.
even when it's hard and
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, one last question for you, and then
Yeah.
I know you have lots of work to do, and what does dying and dignity mean to you personally, not just
hmm
professionally,
Yeah. What does dying and dignity, not
or
with
dying with
dignity?
dignity? Did I
Is
say
there,
dying
yeah, I was
dying with
like,
dignity? Dying with dignity.
is there language is such an important part of all of this, right? Can be taken
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
so many different directions. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a good death or dying with dignity means having your choices, all choices available to you to be
Mhm.
able to make those choices as much as possible for yourself till the end. Now, in the normal dying process, there's going to be a point where you aren't communicating anymore. And so we have to make those wishes known ahead of time so that others can help us with that death that's a good death. It really is a community event, in my opinion, where you need others' support in order to yeah, you need others' support. You need others' support in many ways throughout life. And this is one of those bigger moments that I think it can really be beneficial to have a good support system who understands your wishes and lots of options to be able to make knowledgeable decisions for as long as possible.
Yeah. Good. 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 Yeah. Yeah. I think death is important for us to think about, to talk about a lot more as we've been
Mm-hmm.
having this conversation, as you've made very clear. Death reorients us toward what truly matters. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
question, of course. I mean, there's a question, what does truly matter at the end of the day? And so death forces us to ask that question. So we should ask it consciously, conversationally, and directly. I think that's important. Yeah, it's been good. It's been a good conversation, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for
Yeah, thank
joining me.
you.
And thank you for this. Thank you for your work. I think it's important work. And tell us, and we should have this in the notes as well. Tell us where they can find you, and where listeners can find
Yeah.
you, and anything else you want to share briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, best place to find me is on a website, withlove.events. You can learn more about what I do there. Hopefully it's all laid out there, but that's the best place these days.
Excellent. With love. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. Yeah. Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a strange irony to all of this, isn't there? We spend most of our lives trying not to think about death, yet it's the only reality we all share. When we finally do face it, as Lauren's work reminds us, something begins to shift. We start to declutter not just our homes, but our hearts. We forgive, we simplify, we listen. The theologian Karl Rahner once said something like this: in the torment of the finite, we discover the infinite. Maybe death isn't only an end, but maybe it's a mirror held up to life, revealing what really matters. Vincent Price, the great master of cinematic horror, once said that real horror isn't about the monsters. It's about the moment we realize we're mortal. Yet, that's also the beginning of wisdom. If we can learn to look at death with open eyes and open hearts, if we can sit with it, talk about it, even plan for it, we might just find that death, in the end, has been teaching us how to live. Thanks for listening to It's a Theological World After All. I'm Joshua Farris. You can find more about Lauren's work at withlove.events and lastcallendoflifefestival.com. If this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone. Maybe start your own conversation about what it means to die well, and to live fully. Until next time, keep thinking, keep wondering, and remember, even the end of life can be full of grace.